And so I hope that we can take what we learn here tonight and go out, spread the news, and start getting highly involved in what's going on. So Lord willing, we can straighten some things out and bring Indiana back on its proper course and our country. I'd like to ask the Lord to bless the night before we begin. So I'm going to open with a word of prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brother John Schrock, who will introduce our guest. Amen. Father, we are so thankful for allowing us to be able to host this meeting tonight. And Lord, we come before you again knowing that we need your help in these things. Lord, anything done outside of your will and outside of your power will just not work. So we pray that, God, you'd help us to seek you. Lord, I pray that as, Lord, you sent your Son, Jesus Christ, to die for our sins. Lord, he shed his precious blood to pay our penalty for our sins. Lord, when we come to him in repentance and faith and ask for that forgiveness and for that cleansing of his blood, we are given salvation, the Holy Spirit, and a place in your family. Lord, I pray that each one here tonight knows Jesus Christ as their Savior, and if they don't, that, God, they would be willing to ask me any questions they might have after the service here. But, Lord, I pray that we would understand that, God, we need Christians in the battle. We need people who, Lord, follow the book, the Bible, and God would lead this country in the paths of righteousness, as has been stated today at the Statehouse. Lord, that we need righteousness in our land again. It's righteousness that exalts a nation. Lord, we pray that you'd help us to be a part of bringing righteousness back to this state and to this country. We ask for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Mr. John?
Wow, thank you so much for coming out here on a Tuesday evening. I want to give you an update. We just had a great state legislative action day at the Indiana Statehouse today. Was able to talk about some of the projects that are going on here in the state of Indiana. We've got the LEAP project. We're trying to get that shut down. We're trying to stop carbon sequestration. So I see a lot of you here that were at the state capitol. Thank you for coming back out to be able to be informed. I'm going to rip off a Band-Aid and mention a date, and it's going to cause you to shudder, but I bring it up because of the necessity of the matter. How many of you remember 2020? You know, as soon as I say that, you all start groaning. But, you know, and we're talking about elections tonight. Dr. Frank's going to talk about elections. But we also learned about our Indiana state government, how out of control they are, how despotism and overreach of the government. We think at the federal level, but we have it at the state level as well. And I thought about, you know, it's high time that we replace the governor of the state of Indiana with somebody who understands the Constitution, somebody who understands limited government. I love having conversation with a person, I really want to do this. And they go, now hold on, we don't need to reinvent what happened in 2020, even though it's a good thing. We still have to follow the Constitution. I love somebody like that. And when I was talking to that someone, we were talking at lunch and we were talking at supper, and yeah, you do see barbecue sauce on my shirt. I'm telling you, that barbecue joint here in Liston is second to none. That is top-notch stuff. I got a little bit on my forehead, and my tongue about bore a hole through my forehead on that. So if you get a chance, run over there to the barbecue joint. I fully approve that message on that. So, but I was thinking about, and Curtis Hill. That's who I came up with in order to be able to replace this governor that we have here in the state of Indiana. I want to open up the mic for him and give him a couple of minutes to be able to address us this evening. Curtis Hill.
Thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here. I'm very excited to see the full presentation by Dr. Frank. We had a nice time after the presentation this morning. I just want to spend a few minutes with you and let you know that I'm running for governor because I think that Hoosiers are hungry for proven conservative leadership. People who can back it up based on what freedom is all about. You know, this country is at a crossroads, our state's at a crossroads, and we have sent people to Washington, we've sent people to Indianapolis that say one thing and do another, and I think we're about tired of that. I think we're sick of that. I'm tired of objective truth being assaulted. We've lost faith in our institutions. We've seen the weaponization of race, the misuse of the justice system, and the sexualization of our children. What are we going to do about it? We need to stop electing people who lie to us about what their plans are going forward. We need to accept bold and courageous leadership. How do you tell when someone means it? When someone says, you can have someone come in here and say, well, I'm pro-life and I'm pro-gun, and we nod our heads and we elect these folks, and then we get disappointed because we didn't back it up. We didn't find out what they really meant. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I believe in a culture of life, and I can back it up. In 2019, there were 2,411 aborted babies that were discovered in an Illinois garage. In Illinois. As your Attorney General in Indiana, I went to Illinois and brought those babies back to have them buried here in Indiana soil. Why? Because we wanted to restore the humanity in death that was denied them in life. It was the right thing to do. Not the statutory thing to do, not the constitutional thing to do. It was the right thing to do, and using the power of my office, we got it done. I believe in liberty, freedom, your freedom, and I'm prepared to fight for your freedom. How so? In 2020, we all remember the pandemic. 4 months into the pandemic, Governor Holcomb, a conservative, Governor Holcomb said he was going to mandate the wearing of masks in the state of Indiana and violate you as a Class B misdemeanor for doing so. Thought he had the authority to create a criminal statute. On that same day, I announced my opinion that not only did he not have the constitutional authority to mandate your mask, he had no authority to create a law in violation of it. And you know what he did? He backed down. That's what it's called to stand up against wrong and failed leadership. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe in truth. I believe in truth. And that's why I was appalled when I was Attorney General to find out that the vehicles, your Bureau of Motor Vehicles under a Republican administration, had issued a third classification of human being for a driver's license. A third. Now, I'm used to men and women. They came up with X and actually issued driver's license to X people. Well, we put a stop to it. Why did I put a stop to it? Because truth. Remember, we talked about truth. The truth is that there are only two genders, male and female, and that's worth fighting for. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, that I would actually be anywhere talking about the simplicity of there being male and female, I would have laughed at you. I would have said that's just not possible. But that's fundamentally where we are. We have to dig to the foundations of who we are as a people to move forward. And my gosh, it's bold leadership to make that statement. Isn't that incredible? It takes bold leadership to say there are only men and women. That's how far we're sinking in this country. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm running for governor. It's a grassroots operation. I'm a former prosecutor. I believe in accountability. I'm a former attorney general. I believe in justice, and I believe in freedom. I would appreciate your support. We have brochures at the back of the room. Get on board. Go online at CurtisHill.com. Check us out a little bit. It's up there. So there it is, CurtisHill.com. Check us out. Ask us questions, but get on board with us. I'd love to have your support. Thank you very much. God bless you, and I look forward to the presentation tonight. Thank you, fellas. Thank you, buddy.
You know, when he says it's a bold statement that we can't, it takes boldness to say man versus woman. Another thing that it takes boldness is to say that we need paper ballots. They're trying to hoodwink us. It's as I talked today in the Indiana Statehouse. It's like a day and age where we believe in hoodwinking people. We try to slip it by them. If we're not paying attention, they're trying to slip it by them. I'm not trying to run this rabbit trail too long, but they've got a bill inside the Indiana State Senate that's right now trying to take away parental rights. We talked about it last year. We talked about the year before, how they're going to use government accreditation of these Christian schools. And guess what they're doing this year? They're trying to add on to these Christian schools who are now accepting governmental money. They're going to have to get in lockstep with an out-of-touch with reality government. Folks, that's why we have to have election integrity. We've got to get it back to paper ballots where you go and reach into your pocket and you got a pen. You have to go back to hand counting, not a machine that you drop it into, hand counting. And that's why we asked Dr. Douglas Frank to come. I've had the wonderful opportunity dozens of times to be able to see and have him across my territory in my full-time job. And I love his tenacity for the truth. and secondly, his implementation of the grassroots. He wants you to be involved. He wants you to reach out. He wants you to contact your county clerks. He wants you to be at the county commissioner meetings. He wants you to be at the election board meetings, because the power is inherent in the people. The numbers are going to dazzle you. The information may even overwhelm you. It may cause your mind to go into cognitive dissonance. But I'll tell you, here's the action plan. You talking to your neighbor, you getting out to the county government, you taking back your elections. Did I spoil it? Bill 1286. We actually have a representative willing to take the battle to the State House. But I ask you, are you willing to come to the State House to battle for what we need? With that, we got Dr. Douglas G. Frank, my friend.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. I'm not going to need this because they mic'd me here. Yeah, they did. It's interesting because when I talked to Larissa Sweet today, she put a bill up. She didn't even know the number yet because it just went in last night. So I went online and researched it. They put it up there in her name. And so I've been doing a little more research about your state, and I was explaining at lunch today I was with Curtis and his team. It was awesome. Curtis is right? Did I get that right? I think I did. Curtis Hill. Good guy. I want to say something about our discussion at lunch. But when I was researching it, I noticed that Indiana University did a study back in 2020, and it's online. You can go look it up if you want. And it even says Indiana's voting machines are vulnerable to security issues. So, okay? So it's like you already know. But there was one paragraph that stuck out that I wanted to bring to your attention, and so I highlighted it. It says Indiana has about 4.5 million registered voters, while most U.S. voters live in jurisdictions that use hand-marked ballots. Most Indiana voters live in jurisdictions that use DREs. DREs where you just touch the screen and it records the votes. Think about it. Let's say all of us went into the polling place and all touched the screen, and then somebody came in and said, nah, and just deleted them all. How would you know? How could you even check? Okay, if there's no paper trail, you just basically are giving your elections to other people and totally trusting them, and that's a bad idea, and I can show you why. But anyway, just reading on. Indiana is one of only 8 states to still use DRE machines without verified voting paper audit trail. What's wrong with you? Get your act together. Yes.
You know, in Marion County, the last several elections, they have a paper ballot that you fill out and then you put it in the machine.
At least there's a paper audit trail then. But a DRE is one where you just touch a screen.
Yeah,
and some of them that you touch will print out a sheet of paper that you then put in through and that's another. So there's a variety of systems, but in 2/3 of your counties in your state, there's no paper trail whatsoever. That's stupid. Did you have your hand up?
I was just saying that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's a variety of ways. But anyway, Indiana is only one of 8 states to still use DRE machines without a verified voting paper audit. So you guys are behind the times. In fact, almost 60% of all the voting equipment used in Indiana does not have a paper record. That's just dumb. You as a people should not tolerate that. But let me tell you why you are tolerating it. It's because for decades, you've been paying other people to run your government. You've been paying other people to teach your children. Some of you are homeschooling, I bet you are. And you're paying other people to run your elections. Why are you doing that? Stalin said, it's enough that the people have an election. It doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes. Well, guess what? You have a system where you have just let whoever's counting the votes decide the outcome of every one of your elections. I like Curtis. I met him today. I want to just say something about our conversation that I thought was really illuminating. He was your former AG. Sounds like you're a good guy, too. I'm happy to that's why I made a slide for you. I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. I was going to promote you. Okay, so it worked out fortuitously. But there was a point at which in our conversation where I said that I've now analyzed over 3,000 counties in the United States. There are 3,143 total. None of them reconcile. What do I mean by that? If you go to the county clerk and you say, how many people voted in our election? She'll go click, 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 and look at it on her computer, and let's say it says 1,000 people voted in your election. Then you go to the Secretary of State website and you look it up, it'll say 1,050 voted. And so you go back to your clerk and you say, wait a minute, how come the state and you don't agree? And the state is the official tally. You don't even know your own official tally. You don't even reconcile with your own official tally. The clerks are not in control of your elections. The states are in control of the elections, which is why they don't even know. And when I mentioned that to him, he's like, well, wait a minute, shouldn't we have some kind of audit trail? It's just common sense. I loved that phrase. He says, just common sense. And then we started talking about Adrienne Southworth, who's a senator in Kentucky who's related to John. And she's one of my favorite legislators around the country. And she put a bill before the Senate last year that said, so simply, before a county clerk can report the tally to the state, they have to reconcile their election. What does that mean? That means you have to have a stack of ballots, how many people voted, how many ballots were cast. Then they have to have a list of how many people voted, and it has to reconcile. Okay? Doesn't that just make common sense? But I'm telling you, not a single county in the United States can do that. The clerks don't even try to reconcile it because it never reconciles. And so Curtis will say, no, wait a minute, that just seems like, let's just pass a law that the clerks should have to reconcile. Well, that's exactly what Adrienne tried to do in Kentucky, and it never even made it out of committee. The legislatures don't want to fix your elections. So this lovely lady I met today, Miss Sweet, the sweet lady I met today, I'm sure she's heard that stupid pun her whole life. Just like, everybody says, well, speak to me frankly. How many times are we going to hear that one, right? It's just how many times, right? But the point is, so when I met her this afternoon, she described her bill, and I'm like, that's a fabulous bill. I said, most of the time I talk to legislators, and they'll say, well, we need to do all this election reform, but we think we can only get this passed. And I say, that's like going to your doctor and saying, the doctor tells you have cancer and you have 20 tumors. He says, I think we can get that one out. Well, you're dead, okay? So why not go for all 20? And you're going to die anyway, right? So you try for all of them. Well, she's got a bill that's basically got 19 out of the 20. I have one issue with it, but that's okay. We can argue about that later. I always tell people I don't agree with my wife on everything. I've been married to her for 42 years. That keeps the spice in it, right? If we agreed on everything, it would be boring by now, but it's good stuff. So anyway, I enjoyed my day at the Capitol. I think that was a last-minute addition. I'm happy to be with you here tonight. I should tell you who I am, huh? How many of you have seen me talk before? Raise your hand. Half. Third. So in other words, I got to cover the basics. I can't ignore the basics. Yeah, let me jump right into an example. Shift F. Can you see that? Yeah, Shift F5. So I used to say last year, but I can't say last year anymore because it's now 2024. In 2022, I was invited to speak to the Louisiana GOP, and I'm going to just tell you this story because it's connected to what we were just talking about with Curtis. I'm going to keep the flow going together. And it was right after the movie 2,000 Mules came out. Remember, how many of you have seen 2,000 Mules? Good, most of you. That's good. All right. That's the movie where they basically show videotape of people stuffing ballots, okay? And they're not their ballots. And by the way, I'll just tell you as a side note, those mules get paid about $10 a ballot that they stuff. And so there's a question you might ask, well, where are they getting the money? And you'd be surprised to discover that it's coming from you because your counties are paying the local NGOs to channel that money, and it's crazy. It's a ridiculous situation, but that's another symptom of the fact that you're not running your governments. You're supposed to be being the government. Yeah, and we have to change the way we think about the way we live. That's one of the things I'm going to work on you tonight. But anyway, so I was in Louisiana. It was right after the 2,000 Mules came out, and so the GOP of Louisiana decided to make the theme of the GOP that year, election integrity. Well, 12,000 people showed up. They usually have 500. They had 12,000 people, and the Cajun Dome was, it was awesome to be in the big Cajun Dome, and I got to speak to about 12,000 people, something like that. I've spoken to bigger audiences, but that was a fun one too. But of course, since there's so many people, the Secretary of State, Kyle Ardoin, he had to open up the conference, because he's the Secretary of State. It's about elections. So he talked for about 30 minutes, and he basically bloviated about how great Louisiana is. And I've heard this same story over and over again. We're the gold standard in election security. That's what they all say. And he for 30 minutes, talked about how great their elections were. And then I was next. And so I talked for about an hour, and I showed them all the problems with their elections and all the fraud that we'd already found in the state of Louisiana. And there was a standing ovation and thunderous applause. So you can imagine what Saturday was like at the GOP the day after. Because all those breakout sessions, the committees are like, well, geez, Dr. Frank right, or is Kyle Ardoin right? Who's right? So about mid-afternoon, a group of citizens came to me, and they said, Dr. Frank, we set up a private meeting with you and Kyle Ardoin tomorrow. Would you be willing to attend? Are you kidding? Absolutely. I have done this about 24 times. About 24 secretaries of states I've met like this, and about 24 AGs as well. Wish I had met you when you were in office, but you were already gone by the time the election happened. But so what I'm about to describe to you is a prototype of what, or exemplary of all these other meetings. But I can't talk about all of them because nobody would meet with me in private anymore if I talked about the private meetings. But this one's become public, so I can share this story with you. And it's a super important story because it teaches you an important principle that I'm trying to teach you tonight. So anyway, so I met with him on Sunday morning. Somebody picked me up from the hotel, took me to a private residence, and I met privately with him. For about the first 2.5 hours, I basically explained to him how his elections worked. And most people are surprised when I tell you that. They say, well, wait a minute. He's the Secretary of State. He's in charge of elections. Doesn't he understand how his elections work? No. I'm telling you, our legislators don't know. Our secretaries of state don't know. Often our AGs don't know. Why? Because that's not their expertise. And so I spend like half of my time just teaching them what's going on in their elections and how it works. And so anyway, we took a break for lunch, and we headed over to the dining room table. And he said to me, Dr. Frank, he says, this has been great. I'm learning a lot. He says, I'm just confused about one thing. I said, what's that? He said, in order for the fraud to happen like you're talking about, people would have to have access to our machines. I said, yeah. And he says, that cannot happen. I said, why do you say that? He says, well, because we have the most secure networks in the country. We are the gold standard in network security. He says, I even have this brand new app on my phone that shows me all the network activity going on in real time. So I know that we're secure. That alone should tell you what I'm up against. So anyway, we were sitting down for lunch, so I took my phone out. I said, speaking of phones, I took it out and I set it down between us. And I've done this, what I'm about to describe to you, I've done dozens of times now. And I set my phone down and I called my friend. And I said, hey friend, I'm not going to tell you his name. I'm sitting here with Kyle Ardoin. He's the Secretary of State of Louisiana. That makes this legal. I said, tell me about Louisiana. Those are code words. Within 30 seconds, we told Kyle his own username and password from his own computer at work. We logged into his computer at work through the state network. We downloaded from his computer all the usernames and passwords for all the election systems for the whole state of Louisiana. And then for the next 30 minutes, we went parish by parish. They don't have counties, they have parishes. Parish by parish, remotely turning on and off their election machines. And if it's plugged in, the motherboard's hot. Computer people know what I'm talking about. And it's because they have an iDRAC 8 chip on the motherboard. Sorry about that tech stuff. But anyway, the point is, we can remotely turn them on and turn them off. We could change any ballot we wanted. We could change any tally we wanted. We did that for about 30 minutes straight. And finally, he's just like, he raised his hands. He says, okay, I give. I get it. Okay. But what do I do now, Dr. Frank? What do I do about this? And I said, well, I don't know. Let's look at your state law. So we downloaded his state law and the election code, and it turns out that the Secretary of State has the authority to certify or decertify election machines. So after about a 3-hour strategy, I'm trying to give you the short version, he decided, and we decided together, he was going to decertify all the machines in Louisiana so that they would have to do an all-paper election for 2022, okay? And I love that strategy. It's a great strategy. So I called Mike Lindell about 4 in the afternoon. He and I work closely together on a lot of things. And I said, hey, Mike, I'm sitting here with Kyle Ardoin, Secretary of State of Louisiana, who also happens to be president of the National Secretaries of States Association. He is going to decertify all the machines in the state of Louisiana. He's going to make a public statement explaining why. And Mike's like, way to go, Dr. Frank. He says, I'm looking good. I knew you would. You know, that's what Mike always says. It's funny. Okay. Anyway, the next week, Mike flies down to Louisiana, and they're in the middle of these meetings with their election commission to try to decide what machines they were going to use for the upcoming years and whatnot. So Mike testified to them, and he basically said, we were trying to keep this a little undercover because we're trying to make a hero out of Kyle Ardoin, and we didn't want to steal his thunder. So Mike basically said to the committee, if you guys will switch back to paper, I'll help. I'll bring in all the national experts and we'll remind you how to do this like we used to do it for 200 years. It's not a big deal. We'll teach you how to do it, remind you, and I'll pay all the expenses for the whole state of Louisiana to switch back. Mike's a generous guy. So anyway, that's what that happened. And what was supposed to happen is about a week and a half later, when the committee was done, then Ardoin was going to stand before the public and announce, we've decided our election systems are too vulnerable, and I'm going to have to decertify them until we can find a better alternative. That was the strategy, right? Well, 2 weeks go by, no Kyle Ardoin. We started calling him, started emailing him, no answer. We started, the dozen or so citizens, they started going to his house, going to his office, trying to corner him in the parking lot. What's going on? He was slippery sliding. He was obviously avoiding us. He was ghosting us. So anyway, the election came and went in 2022. Same old machines, same as always, but those 12 citizens never gave up. They kept after him, and they cornered him in late March. And they cornered him in front of a television camera at a press conference, and one of them got the microphone and said, you know, Mr. Ardoin, you met with Dr. Frank the day after the GOP. They hacked into all your elections and showed you that your system was totally not secure. You agreed you were going to decertify all the machines in our state. Why didn't you do it? He denied the whole thing on camera. He said, I never met with Dr. Frank ever. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay? So obviously somebody's got to the guy, right? So these citizens were angry, so they started collecting affidavits. I remember, I filled one out. They also got affidavits from the guy who picked me up from the hotel and dropped me off there, and the people that brought us eggplant parmesan for lunch. And all these people were writing testimony about, you know, what they witnessed that day. They basically documented the entire Sunday, showing that I had been there and I had discussions with him, et cetera, and he had denied it. They met him in his office, Kyle Ardoin, and they told him, we're going to sue you, we're exposing you, and we're going to take you to court on this. The next day, he announced he was going to resign. Okay, and he did. He resigned last year. And this is an important story because it really illustrates the situation we're up against all around the country. One, the senior executives in elections know they're online. Now they'll say, oh, we're not connected to the internet. That's sort of one of these mealy-mouthed lying phrases, okay? It's because they're not on the internet, they're on an internal secure network, which they think is secure, which is not, okay? Anyway, so that's the first thing. They're online. Second, they know they're online and they ain't gonna fix it. They know they're hackable and they ain't gonna fix it. That's important to know. Third, I'm a catalyst. I make trouble all around the country. Everywhere I go, I make trouble. I like that. I'm a troublemaker. But fourth, and this is the important point for you today, nothing happened until when? Till those 12 people stepped up and said, we're going to make something happen. So even though I'm a warrior and I'm out here fighting every day for the country, I need you. I can't do this by myself. I need the people to step up. And it's such a great story to illustrate so much of this. Now, I used to have about a 30-minute presentation where I would prove to you that your machines are online, but I'm going to let that suffice for now. And if you want me to give you more proof, I can, but I would just rather get to my other material, because it's sort of like this is a moot argument. Because even when I've gone into states, like in the state of Missouri, I've gotten the Secretary of State to admit in public, in front of everybody, that all their machines are online. I've gotten to do that, Secretary of State Ashcroft. But then what they'll do, if you win that argument, then they just say, well, yeah, but there wasn't any fraud. I mean, it's like a never-ending argument. You don't get anywhere with that. But it's important that you know that you're being lied to about that, and that's important. Okay, so I think that story is a good one to go. All right, so anyway, let me back up a little. I just wanted to connect to the governor candidate here. I guess I should make one more connection because JBS sponsored me. Well, is this a JBS event or is it not? Yeah, a John Birch Society event. And I owe John a debt of gratitude, so I just want to kind of talk about this for a second. So I'll come back to how I got to this point in a minute, but I want to just connect a dot for you. So I was Mr. Lindell's MC at his cyber symposium in August of 2021. Some of you might have seen me for that. And at the end of my 1-hour presentation, where I basically proved to everybody that the elections were being controlled, they were being controlled who's registered, and it was being controlled who voted. And I showed all the algorithms for that for about 30 minutes. And this guy came up to me afterwards. He walked up the aisle, and we're like up on a stage that's like 3 foot off the ground. And he goes, "Hey, Dr. Frank, have you seen my article?" His name's Kurt Hyde. He's in charge of election stuff for the John Birch Society. And he showed me an article. And what was amazing is what I had just spent an hour proving to everybody had happened. He had predicted 10 years earlier. He wrote this article. It was in the New American. Will the 2010 U.S. Census data be used to fraudulently register voters? And I had just proved for an hour that that's exactly what was going on. Okay, and yet he had done it ahead of time. And so I just got to give kudos to this guy, Kurt Hyde. He's been in this field since the 80s. In fact, one of his first big issues was paper ballots, and that's back in the 80s. So these issues are not new issues. They've been on the table for decades, but we've just all been asleep at the wheel, and it's time for us to wake up and get back to that. But anyway, I thought that was such a neat thing. Yes, it was used, and I proved it. And then along comes John Schrock, who's basically put me in front of all these JBS groups. And after he heard me a few times, he says, "You know, Dr. Frank, you're a Bircher. You just didn't even know it." Because I believe, because I've learned, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I mean, I spent all of 2021 thinking I could fix the country by meeting with secretaries of state. And I thought I could fix it by meeting with legislatures from the top down. Boy, was I wrong. But I learned it. You know, I'm slow, but I got there. I've learned you have to win the country from the bottom up, and we are. But the formulas I'm using is the same one that the JBS has been using for decades. That's why he said that. I just thought that was neat. So as I've been traveling the country, I've been meeting all these different John Birch Society people. I just was in Georgia last week, in fact, with Arthur Hampton, who introduced me to the vice president of the John Birch Society, Wayne Morrow, and he was so excited about my work. He said, "Dr. Frank," and I should have gotten this one out. He said, "Dr. Frank," he says, "at the JBS, we like everything on a trifold." And it's pretty funny because they do. And he says, "Can you write a trifold describing your work, and we'll distribute it all over the country?" And John told me today, it's just coming out today. So it's going to be a brand new trifold out there. You'll be able to see it. But it was an interesting question for me, because it's like somebody comes up to you and says, "Would you write a trifold to teach me how to be a championship chess player?" How do you put that much information in one little trifold? So I worked hard at it. It was about a year ago now, and I came up with a simple formula that explains what I'm doing and why it's working and how to work it. And I call it the 7 steps for taking back our election. So it's a really good exercise. And now JBS is going to be, they've got their version, and it's coming out by yesterday, you said, or yesterday, or this week or something. Yeah, it's now being distributed all over the country, and I really like working with them. I met Lisa Van Gelder, she's in charge of conferences, and they put me on the Speakers Bureau, and I got to speak at their national conference. So I think my connection to JBS is going to be important, and they think so too. They featured me in their magazine last month. There's a whole 4-page article where they talk about it. So if you're not in JBS, I recommend you connect with JBS, because they have been ahead of the curve on these issues. I'm just catching up, apparently. Okay, but you get the point. They also have, when I talked to Wayne, he says, "Would you please promote this around the country?" And is that what you did at the Capitol today? The Freedom Index. So Wayne Morrow asked me to promote that. I am in JBS, but I don't have any formal connection. So I just feel they deserve a little kudos from me there. Okay, let's see. Now let's get back to business. That's sort of getting the commercials done. So I've now been in 48 states. I haven't done Hawaii or Mississippi yet, but I've been in all the rest of them. 800 counties, and I've given over 500 formal presentations like this, and then probably another 1,000 private meetings where I've been very busy. I've been doing this every day since December of 2020, and I'll explain that in a second because it helps you understand something. And I remember when I first discovered the election fraud in Pennsylvania, I was asked to start there. And I told my wife, I said, I'm self-employed. I said, honey, I'm going to set aside my income for 6 months so we can save the country. Shows how naive I was. And so I started going around the country, and I remember last Christmas, a year ago, my wife, it's 2 years now, she says, well, it's been 2 years, and we're looking at the finances, and she's like, how much longer is this going to be? I said, I think it's going to be the rest of my career. I think I'm going to be doing this the rest of my career, and I'm not making any money. And she says, well, that's okay. She said, I think it's your calling. And so that's my wife. I have a good wife. A good wife. Exactly. And so people always ask me, well, how do you do this then? And the answer is I just pass the hat when I travel, and that pays for my plane tickets. I just drove over here from Cincinnati, so I don't have a lot of expenses this time. Gasoline, so don't worry about too much, right? And you bought me lunch today. Thank you for that very much. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. I'm traveling out the country. Now, NPR picked up on this last year, and they wrote an article about Mike Lindell and me and Dave Clements and Seth Keshel. And they noted that I had done 150 formal presentations last year, and they call us election deniers. We're not election deniers. We want free and fair elections. We want everybody to vote, and we want it to be transparent and auditable. We want everybody to be able to have a real election. But I did about 300 talks in that year, the balance of that year. The reason I'm doing that is when I first started this, I thought I could just communicate with people on phone, or I thought I could just do Zooms, but I've learned that doesn't work. You got to be together. You need to be, that's what Jesus' lesson was, right? He didn't send emails. He went town to town, meeting with the people face to face and spreading the gospel. And that's like a major lesson for me, because I'm a scientist. I'm a PhD scientist. I have 60 scientific peer-reviewed publications, cover articles on the leading journals in the world. I'm a real scientist, and I think that data and evidence and logic should work. But it doesn't. You need to be with people. You need to interact at the grassroots. That was a big lesson. A second big lesson I had to learn, I wish I just copied Jesus in the first place, was at the beginning I was trying to build big groups. And that's a huge mistake. I've learned instead you want small groups. And I'll show that in these 7 steps. When I show that to you a little bit later, you'll notice that in my second step I say you need a small local team of selfless, like-minded patriots. And that's what basically Jesus assembled, a small team, and he nurtured them. And I've learned if I try to build a big movement too fast, it just blows up. You don't accomplish anything. So I've kind of had to learn to work the grassroots, but I'm getting pretty good at it now after 3 years of practice. If not, I should change careers. But anyway, so that's another principle. Because I'm on the road so much, I sleep at home maybe 3 nights a month, something like that. I think of myself as a leaf on a river, and I could tell you so many amazing stories they're like coincidences, but they aren't really coincidences. And I wake up in the morning, I look at the ceiling, I don't know where I am. I woke up in my own house this morning, and I didn't know where I was. Okay? And I look at the ceiling, and I just think, and I feel that moment of confusion, and I've learned a habit. When I feel that confusion, that's when I pray. And I say, okay, God, I don't know what we're doing today. I don't know who I'm talking to, but I'm in your hands, and I'm your tool today. And it's been amazing. I'm always in the right place at the right time. I could tell you so many stories like that. But anyway, that's my life. So now you know who I am. Since they called me the Johnny Appleseed of election integrity now, I made me think of something. I went and looked up Johnny Appleseed because I hadn't thought of him since I was a kid. And when I looked it up, I found this YouTube video with Johnny Appleseed singing the Johnny Appleseed song. How many of you know it? Yeah, right? Sing it with me. The Lord is good to me, and so I thank the Lord for giving me the things I need, the sun and rain and an apple seed, yet he's been good to me. Remember that? When I saw this, my mouth fell open because that was Disney. That was Disney. By the way, this month I'm meeting with the Disney family in Southern California. They're super conservative. Super conservative. But the Disney Corporation obviously has lost its way, right? Anyway, I'm meeting with them. They want to sponsor some of the work we're doing, which is awesome. So even though the brand is horrible, the family that started that, are good people and good, and I'm looking forward to meet with them. But anyway, so that was our country only 50 years ago. And so the juxtaposition just kind of like struck me, and I just wanted to talk to you for a second. And as I've been traveling the country, I meet with a lot of youngsters as well, and people say, well, we got to get the young people involved in this. And I've just had almost zero success at that. And I think the reason is because they have no idea what they've lost. We older folks, not you, we older folks, I can't talk that way about a pastor's wife. We older folks know what we lost. We experienced that country, and we see what it is here. I have 3 children. My oldest daughter, Nellie, she's 26. She has Down syndrome. She doesn't know anything about politics. She just loves cuddling and tickling and playing games and color books and stuff. So, but my 2 younger boys, 23 and 21, Daniel and Derek, they're smart as tacks. They know everything I'm saying is real, but they're saying, Dad, this is not our generation's issue. We just don't even relate to this. And so I'm not able to get them. And I think it's because if you think about it, my boys grew up, they became politically aware. And when? When Obama was president. They grew up in that. They don't know better. They don't realize what they've lost. And so the reason I bring this up is because I'm commissioning you. You have to be the ones that are going to fix this problem, because you're the ones who understand what we've lost, and frankly, it's your fault. Because you were asleep while this was happening to us, and you should have been involved. So I'm slapping my own wrist too. I'm 62. I was on duty as well, and I let this happen. All right, so that's kind of my only reproof of you today. All right, so the LA Times caught up on this, and they talked about the fact that I had spoken so much in California at that point. I've had tremendous success in California, and people are surprised by that. They say, Dr. Frank, I remember when I first started going out there, my colleagues were saying, we don't want you there. We need you in Arizona. We need you in Wisconsin. We need you in Georgia. That's where we need you, in the swing states. But they invited me, so I went out there. And what happened is I discovered a state under Marxism. And because they're under Marxism, the people are awake. They're suffering. And there are all these little patriot groups all over the place. And all I have to do is go in and talk to them, and bam, they're on board, and in fact, they're already activated. All I have to do is just kind of direct them a little bit and give them some ammunition. I'm like an arms dealer. And we're tremendous success in that. And one of those big successes was Shasta County. Have you heard of Shasta County, Northern California? That's because you're listening to the wrong news. Okay. Shasta County, Northern California, 75,000 voters. They have all paper poll books, all paper ballots, hand marked, hand counted, hand tallied, hand reported to the state. When we got them to do that as a county, the state of California freaked out. The legislature is like passing laws and resolutions to try to stop the other counties. I have 4 more counties right on their heels. Why am I successful there? Because the people there are awake. They feel what's happening. I'll get one quick side note. I was in Lexington, Massachusetts, speaking to a large church there, and about 1/3 of the people in the audience on one side were all Chinese. It was kind of a strange audience to have a Chinese audience like that. And so I talked to them afterwards, and they said, oh, Dr. Frank, we're all Chinese immigrants. We all experienced communism, and we came to America to escape communism. And everything that happened to us back there is happening to you now, and you don't know it. You're all asleep. Okay? And so that's why California, I think I'm being successful there, because they're not asleep. They're suffering under Marxism and communism. I had a similar experience with a bunch of Cubans in Southern California. Same idea. So I'm talking to you, and you're asleep. So you got to wake up. You got to realize what's happening to you, and you have to step up and start engaging government again. Anyway, that's good. I think I've made that point. I already told you I'm a scientist. I have 60 scientific peer-reviewed publications. I was so cool in my academic career. I was lucky I got to make a major scientific discovery. It made me world famous. I got nominated for a Nobel Prize in chemistry, cover articles in the leading journals. It was a great experience. I learned a lot about how to speak to large groups, how to survive by standing with the truth. It was good stuff. But anyway, I'm a real scientist. I left academics in 1996 because it was so woke in 96. I couldn't stand it anymore. So I went into business for myself. I did all kinds of things. I'll talk about that another time. I'm also a terrorist. So I need to go back. I need to fill in a detail because I'm trying to. I think you know who I am now. So I need to teach you something. I'm going to teach it. I'm going to take you through my process a little bit. So how did I get red pilled? How did I realize the situation we were in? So after the 2020 election, you might remember Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. He held a public hearing it was televised across the nation where they were reviewing the evidence of fraud in the state of Pennsylvania. Well, the next day I got a call from this lady, Kathy Barnett. In her district, she's a black woman, very popular black woman. Everybody thought she was going to win hands down, and she lost 60-40. And she and I had become friends during COVID. And I was on her podcast. She was on my podcast. It was because we were arguing about COVID around the country. But anyway, she said, Dr. Frank, would you please look at my election? So she sent me all of her data, and I looked at it. And that afternoon, it only took me about 3 hours, and I had a whole page full of anomalies that needed to be investigated. So she introduced me to the two of the senators that were, or these are actually legislators, who were in charge of the election investigation in Pennsylvania. And I don't want to talk about Pennsylvania, but I want to give you two examples because they're going to apply to you, and you're going to see why I'm telling you these two examples. So anyway, I got to see everything I wanted. The first thing we did is we just went county by county, and we said, how many people voted here? How many people voted here? How many people voted here? We just totaled up how many people voted in the state. Then we counted up all the ballots that had been tallied. And we noticed that there were 765,000 more ballots that were tallied than they had people who voted. 765,000 more ballots tallied than who voted. So we showed, when Secretary Bookvar, who is Secretary of State, presented the election to the legislature, these guys, to have it certified 3 weeks after the election, one of the legislators raises his hand. He says, wait a minute, we can't certify this election. Why not? Well, because it says right here in state law, you shall not certify any election where there are more ballots than voters. Okay? And we have 765,000 more ballots than voters. You go check. It's a matter of public record. It's right on the floor. Secretary Bookvar said, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. That's just COVID. What do you mean, COVID? Well, all of our clerks are just behind on all the record keeping. Once all the clerks do their reporting, everything will reconcile. Don't worry about it. Well, so they went ahead and illegally certified that election, and it never reconciled after that. I checked it months and months afterwards. They were always tens and tens and tens of thousands way out of reconciliation. So that was illegal, it was stuffed, and yet it went ahead anyway. That's important. Now, that's a simple one to understand. Now I'm going to give you one a little more complicated, and it's connected to you as well. My specialty was the voter rolls, and I focused on the voter rolls in Kathy Barnett's county, Montgomery County, because that's where the 4 Supreme Court cases were from Pennsylvania, and I was in 2 of those cases that went from Pennsylvania to the Supreme Court. So I concentrated on that, and I got to have anything I wanted, So I asked for all the history for Montgomery County, all the way from 1900 to present. I knew every person who had ever registered to vote there and every person who ever voted. All their records, I had everything. And I was studying it, and because I'm a data guy. And I noticed something interesting. 2 months before the election in 2020, about 50,000 people got added to the voter rolls, all in one big clump. And that's 50,000 out of 500,000. So it's about a 10% increase in their rolls. And that alone is not too suspicious because a lot of times states kind of collect up all the registrations and just kind of put them all in at one time into their system. So I wasn't too worried at that point. But then I checked, and every one of those 50,000 had voted. And that's not too suspicious because new registrants tend to vote. That's pretty normal. But then what surprised me is by the end of November, half of those new registrants had been removed from the rolls. And by the end of December, the second half had been removed. So let's review. 50,000 people were added 2 months before the election. They all voted, and then by the end of December, they were all removed again. That was confusing to me. I didn't understand that. So I asked Secretary Bookvar, since I had subpoena authority, tell me, why are you removing those people from the voter rolls? And she answered me that day by email, quote, because they moved away, unquote. Because they moved away. And that surprised me too. I didn't expect that answer. So I went and investigated, and because if you've ever looked at a voter roll, you know the name and address, and when they register to vote, you know a whole bunch of things about every voter. You know the birth date, everything. So I started looking them up, those 50,000 people. And I stopped after about 60 or 70 of them, and I jumped around the list too. She was right. They had all moved away 10 years earlier. So understand what happened. Somebody had older copies of the rolls. They were putting voters back into the rolls who were not real voters. Since they knew they had put those people in, they stuffed ballots for those people. And then the systems, the state systems, they have automatic systems that check change of address and no longer residents, were automatically removing them after that. So then obviously the question is, well, who did that? Who put those 50,000 in? Because they would be responsible for stuffing the ballots. So that's the obvious question. So what we did is since I had subpoena authority, we asked for a copy of all the logs on the state registration system for about 2 months. And we put a team of 6 people on it, and they combed those records, and we finally found it. 4 entries right next to each other on a Tuesday afternoon, where 50,000 people had been added to the rolls, all essentially within a few minutes of each other. Now, in cybercrime, you don't know who's doing the crime. You only know what the login credentials are and when it happened, right? So that's what we had. So the login credentials for those 50,000 surprised me. Again, it said the Hillary Clinton campaign. And I thought, I don't understand, because this is 2020, not 2016. So I talked to Russ Diamond. I said, I don't understand, Russ. I said, why is Hillary Clinton campaign have access to your voter rolls? And he said, oh, I know what that is. And he sent me a newspaper clipping from 2015 when the Pennsylvania state legislature hired the Hillary Clinton campaign to write an app that allowed people to be registered at football games and college campuses and rock concerts and whatnot. And that app, the credentials for the developers were still active. So in other words, the people who had developed that app back in 2015 still had access, back-end access to the rolls. So then, of course, the next obvious question is, well, who else has access to the voter rolls? So we put that team of volunteers back on the list again, and we discovered within that 2-month period of time, 32 different non-government organizations, 32 NGOs we call them, had access to the voter rolls, and they were adding voters who ballots were then being stuffed for them. And that's a huge mess, yes? Okay. So, I'm teaching you here. So we showed the legislators all this evidence. I mean, this isn't speculative. You have the log showing that it happened. You have the ballots that were counted. You have the cleaned up afterwards. The whole thing is all there. I'm a scientist. I'm still, in that point, working with Republican legislators in the state of Pennsylvania, where I have a Republican majority in the legislature. I think I'm saving the country. This is like the second week of December at this point. And I say, I get, what do I expect to happen? I expect these guys to go, oh no, it's a disaster. Our election was stolen. We got to do a do-over. I mean, that would be the logical thing to do, right? It just shows what a rube I am. I don't know politics. They said, oh, this is horrible. We're going to throw out our voter rolls. Oh, okay. And we're going to hire a firm to rebuild the voter rolls in time for our spring elections. Okay, maybe that's just the first step. Your voter rolls are a mess. We're going to fix them. Okay, and one of them, Russ, he even put forward a bill in January later. He put in a bill that said only government organizations can have access to the voter rolls. It didn't even make it out of committee, just so you know. Okay? But anyway, they said, we're going to hire a firm. That contract was awarded on December 20th, 2020 for $10 million. And 3 days later, that firm was bought by Zuckerberg for $13 million. And that sent off all kinds of red flags in my head, because Hillary Clinton campaign was responsible for the most manipulation I saw in the rolls. The next biggest one was CTCL, Center for Tech and Civic Life. That's Zuckerberg's organization. So what I witnessed is them putting the fox right back in the hen house. The same people that were manipulating it before are going to have access now. That's ridiculous. So that was my red pill moment. That's when I woke up and said, these people are not going to fix this election. They're trying to cover the whole thing up. And I was mad, and I didn't talk to them for about a week. So then I went to Florida, and I downloaded all the data from Florida because it's publicly available, their voter rolls and whatnot. And while I was in Pennsylvania, I discovered how to analyze the election rolls and everything. And so I applied my same methodology that I'd used in Pennsylvania to Florida, and I found the same things happening in Florida. So I flew down and met with the Secretary of State in DeSantis' office in Mar-a-Lago, and they covered the whole thing up. They covered the whole thing up. So I did North Carolina next. You see where I'm going? I was going to the red states because I was still thinking Republicans are good, Democrats are bad. I was naive. I had to learn that lesson, okay? And I was shocked to learn that that's just simply not the case. So I'm taking you through that process. So now we're at the end of February, and yes, at the end of February, and Kathy Barnett called me and said, I give up, Dr. Frank. They're not going to fix my election. That's when the Supreme Court rejected the 4 cases. And I'll just tell you, since I'm at a church, I can do this because you'll get it. At the end of February, I was doing this in my mind. Okay, God, the courts won't save us. The legislatures are not going to save us. We're back to the people. If there are 50 faithful people left in America, God, will you not destroy us? If there are 20 faithful people left in America, I'm doing like the Abraham or bargaining with God for Sodom. Right? I'm doing the bargaining thing because I'm like really down because my country's in a wreck and they're not going to fix it. And the most conservative states are not addressing the problem. This is an issue. So she said, I give up. They're not going to fix my elections, but I'll introduce you to Mike Lindell, because I just met him at CPAC last week. And Kathy Barnett said that to me. So then I flew down. I actually, first I did a demonstration for about 16 attorneys. You've heard all their names, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, all those folks. And Mike Lindell's attorney called me down, and Mr. Lindell made a video, documentary about my work. It's called Scientific Proof. It's about an hour long. It was the second documentary Mr. Lindell did. And then he did a third documentary called Absolute Interference, where he put another 30 minutes or so. Now, one of the things is, when I made this video with him, I was still under the impression, which is a mistake, that the data were so obvious and the statistics were so obvious that all I had to do is tell everybody the statistics, and everybody would go, oh, no, this is horrible, we got to fix this. I've learned that numbers just don't work. It's kind of like if you go to your board, your commissioners, and you say, oh, our murder rate's going up in town. Everybody wrings their hands, oh, that's horrible. Nothing happens. But if you drop dead bodies off in the middle, then things start to happen, okay? And that's what I've learned. You have to find the dead bodies. That's how we get action, and that's going to tie back into my strategy that I'm about to teach you. So anyway, we made this movie, and I was filmed for about 3.5 hours with Mike, and I was really tired. Anybody know Mike Lindell know that? 3.5 hours with Mike Lindell is a lot, okay? And I got really tired, and I just said, Mike, that ain't natural, buddy, at one point, instead of giving him long technical definitions. And that's kind of become like my catchphrase, that ain't natural, buddy. But that's what I'm going to do for you tonight, because it's too late for me to get into a bunch of math, okay? So I'll just, whenever I see something, if you want the math, we can do the math later, but we're going to do that ain't natural. Then the next big thing I should just throw in before I get into some data is President Trump asked me to be his keynote speaker at the Wellington rally in Ohio. That was his first rally after being out of office. And he asked me to teach the world how his election was stolen. That was my job. And so what happened is the Thursday night before that, Tucker was supposed to have me on his program because it's like the preview for the big day. And at the last minute, it was supposed to be Thursday night I was on with him, and on Wednesday night the producer called me and said, nope, we've canceled your appearance, you're not going to be on. And I didn't understand it at the time, but later I spoke with Tucker, and he explained. He said, yes, he says, we had to cancel that because there are 15 things we're not allowed to talk about on Fox. And one of them is election fraud. And he read the whole list. And I don't remember the whole list now. It's been too long ago. But it was, I remember Soros was on that list. They're not allowed to talk about Soros. They're not allowed to talk about vaccine risk. They're not allowed to talk about big pharma. They sign contracts, all these things that they're not allowed to talk about. So if you're watching Fox, you're not getting the news. They're not telling you. And I knew that in July of 2021, and I was telling everybody, stop listening to them. They're stealing they're not telling you what you need to know. It's propaganda. It's not news because they're filtering it. But people didn't believe me at the time. And, oh, we love Tucker. We love Tucker. Oh, yeah, well, he's not your friend. He's just a good businessman. He's actually he's actually left of center. And he's marketing a conservative message to a conservative audience. But he's a good businessman. He's making a lot of money, isn't he? Doing a good job, but he's actually way more liberal than you think. So anyway, I don't want to go down that road, but that's another big eye-opener for me is to meet these people in person. They're not who you think they are a lot of times. Somebody chose what you see, and that's interesting. Anyway, I remember getting up in front of 21,000 people that day at a Trump rally. If you've been to a Trump rally, they're pretty rowdy. And these people had been standing there, 21,000 people, for about 6 hours out in the hot sun, drinking beer, listening to rock and roll at a Trump rally. And I remember walking up to the microphone. I'd prepared this amazing statistics talk, and all these data I was going to show people. And I remember thinking, I just wasted a whole week of my life because I'm going to try to teach these people math. Ain't gonna happen. But I got to tell you, I got going, and I had slide after slide, and after about 10 minutes, I had them in the palm of my hands. Every graph would come up, you'd hear, ooh, ah. It was like the best math class of my life, okay? It was amazing, and the next day, they made memes about me. It was awesome. So there is a lot of math under here, but I promise you tonight I'm not going to bury you in a lot of that math. But that original approach is not what I use anymore. I don't really talk about the statistics as much because it don't work. When 1% of people that hear it are going to go, oh my goodness, that's a huge amount of fraud. We got to do something about it. But the other 99, their eyes glaze over, and it doesn't work. And so I've had to learn that by trial and error too around the country. So I've been going around basically teaching everybody a little bit of math and a lot of grassroots work. Mike Lindell had me be his MC, as I mentioned. A year later, he did the Moment of Truth Summit, and then this last year at the Election Crime Bureau Summit, he announced a new strategy where he's going to equip everybody with these little electronic detectors that allow you to prove that your election machines are online. Won't that be fun when you can have those and carry those in your back pocket? He also announced at that meeting that he's broke, and I'll tell you how you can help him. But if you haven't seen a lot of this stuff, you can see it on lindelltv.com or frankspeech.com. I encourage you to watch Mike's program. It's called the Lindell Report, weeknights at 6 o'clock Central Time. And man, it's hot in here. It's 6 o'clock Central Time. And, a whole hour of Mike is a lot. But if you can listen to the first 10 minutes, you'll know what's going on around the country. It's sort of like Rush Limbaugh. You didn't have to listen to 3 hours of his shtick. You could just catch 10 minutes now and then, and you would know what was going on. So that's what I encourage you to do. But anyway, please support Mike. Christmas season, you could have bought a bunch of stuff, but he announced that he's broke. He spent all of his personal money on this. He's actually borrowing money to keep fighting the fight. And so I told him, I said, well, I'm traveling the country. How do you want me to promote you, Mike? And he says, have everybody go to mypillow.com and buy stuff, or go to the Lindell Offense Fund and donate, and tell everybody to use your promo code so I know it's from you. And I said, Mike, I don't have a promo code. I don't want a promo code. I don't charge for any of my work, and I don't want anybody to think I'm doing this for money. And he says, no, I need you to use a promo code so I know where you are and what you're doing. And so he set up a promo code, Dr. Frank. I got even with him. I called corporate the next week, and I set it up so all the money goes back to him. So I have the best promo code. If you're going to buy something, use my promo code because he gets more money from it, all right? So if you're trying to help. What's that? You love the towels. I love the slippers, yeah. But anyway, so that's I think that's my last commercial for the night. I promise you Mike's the real deal, and this is how you know. I'm in a church, so you should all get this one, right? But anyway, that's a good one. All right, let's get to some data. All right, one of the things that I need you to learn some simple ideas. The first idea I need you to learn is that in every state in America, our elections are centrally controlled. We're not in charge of our elections anymore. They're all being controlled centrally at the state level. And there's this beautiful mosaic. By the way, you have a beautiful Capitol building. I think that was my first time in your Capitol building. It's gorgeous. Some of them are pretty ugly around the country, but yours is gorgeous. First time, I think, in there. But this is in the Capitol building of Wisconsin. They also have a beautiful Capitol. It's a mosaic in the dome. It's a picture of Lady Liberty. And with one hand, she's pointing towards heaven, because that's the source of our liberty and our inspiration. And with her other hand, she's protecting the ballot box, because that's how we protect our liberty. And that's exactly what's wrong with our elections, is we aren't protecting the ballot box anymore, which is why we're losing our liberty. If you were in charge of the ballot box, you could get rid of the buggers who are in office that you don't like, but you're not in charge of the ballot box anymore. That's the problem. So, and as I said, in every state in America, I now know, I've analyzed so much, every state are now centrally controlled. And I just want to give you a quick couple of examples, because I'm still teaching you a little bit. I got to speak with a private meeting with Speaker Robin Vos. He's the Speaker of the House in the state of Wisconsin. And it was 3 of us were there. A citizen set it up. It was me, Sean Smith. He's a retired colonel from the Air Force, an expert in cybersecurity. He was in charge of Space Force cybersecurity, retired in 2019. And then John Eastman, who's a constitutional expert. And the idea was, we had an hour and a half with Robin Vos. The idea was Sean was going to do the prove our elections are hackable step, which he did. And then it was my turn, and I was going to summarize all the fraud we'd already found in Wisconsin. And then John was going to say, now that you know that your machines are hackable, now that you know you have all this fraud, this is what you need to do. You have these constitutional authorities as a legislature. You have this power. I agree with Curtis today at lunchtime. We kept saying, even if he were a governor, he has to defer to what the legislature says about elections. That's right. So that was John Eastman basically explaining to him, now that you know, here's your plenary authority. Here are your authorities that you have. So anyway, Sean did great, and it was my turn. And I was about halfway through my presentation, and he interrupted me. Robin Vos interrupted me. He says, Dr. Frank, he says, I just don't think we have that much fraud in our state. And I said, why do you think that? He says, because we've done recounts in our 3 largest counties, and all the recounts came out right. So I told him, I said, sir, it doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. It doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. What matters is how many of the bills are counterfeit. It doesn't matter how many times you count the ballots. What matters is, are they from the people you think they're from? And especially in 2020, huge percentages of our ballots we had lost chain of custody. They were coming in through the mail and drop boxes. And what did I describe in the state of Pennsylvania? Remember that somebody added 50,000 names and ballots were stuffed using those names. It's not really from those voters. Those are stuffed ballots. By the way, we knocked on those doors and confirmed and got affidavits proving. We picked 1,600 of them at random, and we proved, yes, that those were not real ballots. So I'm a scientist, so I never just only trust digital data. We always go do the extra step that you're supposed to do to document. So anyway, we proved that to him. And by the way, if you didn't hear about that, after that meeting, Robin Vos stepped out, and 10 television cameras were waiting for him. It was supposed to be a secret meeting, but it somehow leaked out. And they cornered him against a wall, and they were peppering him with questions. And he admitted to the world that there's widespread fraud in the state of Wisconsin, more fraud than the margins in the election. And the reporter said, well, what are you going to do about it? And he says, there's nothing we can do about it. You have to elect a new governor. But that just means he wasn't paying attention in class, because John Eastman explained, no, it's not the governor who has the authority over the elections. It's you. He just didn't have any spine, any backbone. He wasn't willing to make the stand. But anyway, if you didn't hear about that, you're listening to the wrong news, because it was on the Lindell Report that night. Mike had me on to explain it. All right, now I'm getting into some data, but I'm teaching you along the way. So I testified before for their legislature on December 8th of 2021, and I showed them this graph. This is monthly, how many people are in their voter rolls, starting from November of 2009 to December of 2021. And I said, notice what happened. Right before, I was showing this to Speaker Voss in the private meeting as well. Right before the election in 2012, your voter rolls suddenly surged as people voted and you took them out. Does that sound familiar? And then the midterm, rolls filled up, you took them out. And then in 2016, the voter rolls in those 3 largest counties filled right back up again. And then after the election, you removed 1/4 of the voters from your voter rolls in Wisconsin in the 3 largest counties. And then they're all back again in 2020. Nobody had ever seen this graph before. It took me 3 days of work to go county by county, gathering all that evidence and putting it together in a graph. It's a lot of work. Anyway, so I said to him, how do you explain this, sir? How do you explain this huge variation? And he says, well, those 3 counties, they have a lot of turnover. Thanks for laughing. 25, I said, 25%? That's a lot of turnover in that amount of time. And he said, oh, no, those 3 counties have a lot of turnover. And I said, well, then, what about all your counties? Every county. This graph, when I presented it before their legislature, went viral. All over the state, it was in almost every newspaper. Because the people were being told, we can't have widespread fraud in our state because every county runs their own election. Does that look like every county is running their own election? That ain't natural, buddy. Okay? That ain't natural. So that's important. Now, the other point I want to make to you is Wyoming. And then I'm going to show you your data. So everybody says, oh, yeah, lots of fraud there. Well, Wyoming is the most conservative in the country. 8 out of 9 people are registered Republican. They voted 3-1 for Trump, more than anybody else. These are their 3 largest counties. Here I'm not showing it on a percent scale. I'm putting it on a raw scale. So you can just see the raw numbers in their 3 largest counties. I can show you, notice they have the same problem right before the election. The rolls surge, and they are changing. I can show you every single county in the state. It's the same pattern. And they're changing 20 to 25% on average every 2 years. Okay? That's the most conservative in the country. Okay? And the reason why I wanted to emphasize this is because this is their legislature. This was their legislative session a year ago now. They have 26 Republicans that vote consistently with their most consistent Republican. That's a King James Republican right there. Okay? And then they have 26 Republicans that vote consistently with their 6 liberal Democrats from the 6 big cities. So think about the state of Wisconsin. Every time, if they want to do election reform in their state, there are 26, every vote is 26 against 26 plus 6. They're not going to be able to do legislative reform in that state, are they? You aren't even close to this. They're way more conservative than you are. So that's why when I said today to Representative Sweet, I said, you're not even going to make it out of committee, I bet. She said, you're right. She says, but I need to do this bill because this is what the people want. We need to build a movement under her, and we need the people to be aware that this is a problem. One more comment about this before I get back to data. You might recall in 2022 that the state of Wyoming got rid of Liz Cheney. They built a statewide movement. They got their gander up, and they had a huge turnout in their election, and they threw out Liz Cheney. At the same time, they replaced their Secretary of State. His name is Chuck Gray. He's my favorite Secretary of State. He really is trying to do election reform in that state. He and I have had multiple meetings. But the very first bill that this legislature considered, get this, they said, we want to take away authority over our elections from the Secretary of State, and we want to set up an election commission, quote unquote, like they have in the state of Wisconsin. So get this, the people elect somebody to fix their elections, and the first thing the legislature says is, not so fast. Not so fast. We're not going to let you have that control. But fortunately, just narrowly did not pass. So you can see the situation. So I don't want you to look to the legislatures to fix this problem. You need to be putting pressure on the legislatures. You need to keep doing that, but don't expect anything soon. You need to be building the heat from underneath. You need to be building the grassroots movement, because that's how we get attention. And I could give you more examples, but I just needed you to understand those concepts. All right, let me now move on. Okay. Oh, I should show you this, and then I'll get to yours. Sorry. I think this last one I'll show you. From Kentucky. You guys are close to Kentucky, right? Yeah, yes. You're just one state over. So this is I'm going to use this so you know the whole country now. In the whole country, let's use this example. Kentucky, this is from 2017 to present. The blue curve is the number of people who are voting age and more. So everybody who's voting age and higher. And the black curve is how many people are in their voter rolls. Let's just kind of zoom in on that a little bit. So this is not who's eligible to vote. This is who's of voting age, right? Because you got illegal aliens, you got legal aliens. And here is the voter rolls in Kentucky. And you'll notice that the voter rolls are growing faster than the population. That is the case in every state in America. In every state in America, the voter rolls are growing faster than the population, including yours. And right before the 2020 election, you notice that there was a nice little extra surge in the voter rolls in Kentucky. Now they're at 105% of their people registered. Okay? You can't have 105% of your people registered, can you? There's a problem with that, especially since the blue line is supposed to be, is actually lower. Well, I'm not the first person to notice that. You notice that there's this interesting little feature here. Judicial Watch has been going around the country suing counties and states and winning every lawsuit. And they sued them in Kentucky, and Kentucky was required legally, because they had a whole bunch of people that were in the rolls illegally, were required to remove them in 2019, and then the ACLU countersued, and all those people they took out, they put right back in, even though it had been proven in court that they were illegally there, right? So that counting on the courts to save us is not going to work either, is the point. Also, the fact that you get to see the voter rolls. Now, that's one example. Let me give you one more example. In Los Angeles County, this last year, almost a year ago now, Judicial Watch sued them, along with EAIPCA. It's a grassroots group there. They sued Los Angeles, and Los Angeles had to remove 1.2 million people from their voter rolls. That's about 1 in 4 of their voters. They had to take out of they were in the rolls illegally. And 2 months later, I checked the rolls, they're right back full again. But it's not the same people they took out. They have a whole bunch of new non-real voters back in the voter rolls. So one of the movements that I see in a lot of states, people say, when you see how dirty the voter rolls are, people say, oh, we got to clean the voter rolls, we got to clean the voter rolls. I think that's the wrong emphasis right now. Why? Because it's not that the voter rolls are dirty that's the problem. The problem is you're out of control of the voter rolls. Think about my Pennsylvania example. You could have perfectly clean voter rolls and then the night before put in a whole bunch of unreal voters and stuffed ballots. You need to have control of the voter rolls. Who should have control of the voter rolls? The county. The people should have control. As long as we have a centralized system, we're in trouble, because not only are you hackable, but somebody else is controlling your voter rolls, not your local county. And I don't know, I haven't spoken to a clerk here for a while. It's been probably a year since I've spoken to one of your clerks. I spoke to him a lot in the early days. I'm not sure whether this is one of the states where the clerks are even allowed to remove voters from their voter rolls. For example, in Kentucky or Georgia, where I just was last week, the clerks aren't even allowed to add and remove people from the rolls. They have to fill out a form that goes to the state, and the state adds and removes them. So the local control is just being completely taken away. I'm not sure what it is here. But the point is, anybody can get into your rolls because they're centrally controlled. High school level, a hacker can get in there. So don't try to clean your voter rolls. Get control of your voter rolls, then clean your voter rolls. It's like cleaning your kid's room, right? You spend all day cleaning your kid's room, and 5 minutes later, it's all dirty, right? It's like you need to lock the door, then you'll stay clean. Okay, that's okay. How is all this possible? Of course, it's because they're all connected by machines. That's stupid. It's because it's all on the internet. And I could give you a whole lecture, and I don't want to do it, and I promise I won't, of all the systems that are involved. There are multiple systems that are integrated. I've had to become an expert at this, and I hate every minute of it. It seems like a total waste of time. It's very complicated, but how do you maintain the voter rolls? How do you mail ballots? How do you receive ballots? How do you process them? How do you check for signatures? All these electronic systems are all integrated. It's a mess. It's complicated. We just need to vote Amish. To vote Amish, we need to get rid of all the electronic stuff and go back to voting the way we used to vote on paper. And this is my oldest daughter, Nellie. She has Down syndrome. And she voted Amish in the primary in 2022. And she was so proud to do it. She understood exactly what she was doing. But she looked over my shoulder the night before, and she saw me on my practice ballot. And she says, "Oh, I love John. I love Mark." She was picking them out. She knew who they were because she'd gone to the events with me, right? She's hugged these guys. And that's a good reason to vote for somebody if you love them. So I took her into the polling place, and there was only one problem, and that's that her ballot was not a secret ballot, because when she was in the polling booth, she was going, "Oh, I love Joe. I love Mark." And everybody in the room was just grinning. And that's really what our election should be, right? We should be together. It was amazing. But if you go to your clerks now and you say, "Oh, we want to get rid of the machines," they're going to tell you something. They're going to say, "No, we have to have the machines because of handicapped people." That's what they're going to tell you, okay? And that is not the law. That is not federal law. Federal law says if you have electronic machines, then you have to have machines that are handicap accessible. And it doesn't say you have to have them. And Nellie votes just fine with her pen on paper. She voted just great. In Ohio, we have a pen and we mark it on paper, and then it goes into a scanner, which I'm trying to get rid of. But she can vote just fine. We don't need it. But what gave me the idea, and the reason I brought this up also, this Vote Amish idea, is because in Ohio in 2020, 60,000 Amish people came out to vote for the very first time. Why did they do that? Because DeWine was imposing COVID restrictions on their community, and they figured, okay, we better get involved. You know, they had a religious reason to not be involved in the past, but they now have a religious reason to get involved. And if you think about it, we have religious reasons to get involved too, because, you know, our God doesn't condone killing our babies. And our God invented male and female. I know the difference between an innie and an outie. I grew up on the farm, okay? I know how that all works, and God knew exactly what he was doing. And so do you, because you got 13 kids. Okay, so so my point is, this is a religious issue. And yet 30% of our evangelicals are not voting, so that's a problem. Okay, all right, I think I've given you that. We need to go back to all paper poll books, paper ballots. We need to, everything is, I'm showing you how they do it in France. All of Europe does it this way, in one day. Why can't we? We used to. 20 years ago, we were doing this around the country, and we're told, oh, it's not feasible anymore. Oh, yes, it totally is feasible. And we've done all kinds of feasibility studies around the country. This is my favorite one, and then I got to get to your data. And this is we call it the Cajun clothesline. We spent $47 on hardware, fancy hardware, at the hardware store. Deputy loads the ballot. It's a 12-issue ballot, and he loads it on the string, and then citizens tally up the ballots. They run 100 ballots, and they compare tally sheets. If the tally sheets agree, they rubber band the tally sheets onto the ballots and do the next 100. They can do an entire precinct of 1,000 people in about 2.5 hours. Everything's been triple checked. And what you do is you put a camera here on both sides so that people can watch from home, and they can do their own tallies at home. And this doesn't guarantee that the ballots are counterfeit or not, but it restores faith in the counting process. And right now, half of our people, I mean, that's the number one reason for getting rid of the machines right there. Half of our people will never trust our elections again because they won't ever trust the machines. So this is a very feasible, very inexpensive way for us to restore faith in the counting process at least. But my absolute favorite part about this is that it's all online. No pun intended, right? Okay. So let me tell you well, I'll come back to that. I need to show you your data. I promised to show you your data, and I keep my promises. Then I'm going to come back to the strategy next. So let's look at your data. So this is your state. This is from 1990 to present. How many people are 18 and older in your state? And it looks like you're leveling off a little bit. You're not growing as fast as you used to. Does that match your instincts here? Here are the number of people who are in your voter rolls for every election since 1990. And you notice that your voter rolls are growing faster than your population. Every state is in that situation, growing faster. And you have, it looks like 90% of your people or so. Paula spoke at the event today at the Capitol. She was a former clerk in Fountain County. And I asked her the question. I said, what percentage of your voting age people do you have registered? She says, oh, it's about 60%, 65%. That would be here. Okay? So I showed her the data for Fountain County. I'm going to show you yours in a minute. And she's like, wait a minute. Who are all those other people? Yes, who are all those other people that are in your voter rolls that don't belong there? That's a problem, huh? So, in other words, you were growing faster than the population, and then it's tracked the population. But it's already way higher than the population trend, and it needs to be cleaned out. Now, I can show you the number of people who voted in every election as well. And you'll notice there's a natural cycle here, midterm, presidential, midterm, presidential. That's normal. More people vote for presidentials than they do in midterm. And while I'm on this, let me just talk about that. I told this to Curtis today. It's super important that you get a huge turnout in the primary. The primary is the easiest thing to cheat because the turnout's lower. And you have 5 candidates, so it's going to be low numbers. Let's say that 30% of the people turn out and it's equal between all the candidates. Then that means you're going to have 6%, 6%, 6%, 6%, right? It only takes a little bit of tweak to make one of them the winner. The primary matters. Turnout in the primary. And in Clark County, Washington State, the churches organized and they turned out 70,000 more people than anybody expected in the 2022 primary, and they swept every election. So there is a way to defeat the fraud, but you have to get organized, and you got to get, and a whole bunch of evangelicals, like 30% of them don't vote. So you can get the churches organized. That's a hot tip for you there. Anyway, wanted you to see this. Now notice that this pattern just kind of was going along, just hum, and then it changed right about here, right around 2000. What happened in 2000? HAVA, Help America Vote Act. That's when we switched to electronics. Why did switching to electronics change how many people voted and how they voted? It shouldn't have any effect, should it? It should just be a faster way to do it. But no, the nature of the voting has actually changed. And one of the things I've seen in every state in America is it became more volatile after that as well. It's not merely, and why is it more volatile? Because there's more, look at the difference between that and that. That happened after you had a surge in the voter rolls. That's called NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, 1993. That's a consequence of that, where the states were encouraged to put everybody in the voter rolls who gets a driver's license. Put everybody in the voter rolls who gets social services. In other words, you're just deliberately inflating your voter rolls. There's something else I should see on here before we leave this slide. Notice this huge turnout in your midterm in 2018. And when I show those data to people, they always say, because whatever state I'm in, they always say, oh yeah, but that was a special year in our state, Dr. Frank. Look at that. It's almost a factor of 2 higher than normal turnout in your 2018. And people say, oh yeah, but that was an especially important year in our state. We had a really contentious race. That just means you bought the propaganda from the media, because that's in every single state in America. They all surged like crazy in the 2018 election. I like what Seth Keshel says about that. He says he thinks that was them getting us ready for the ridiculously high turnout that they were going to get in 2020. And then you're back down here to in 2022. This was your turnout statewide. It's back towards normal. So notice the federal elections, there's some funny business there, but that midterm also, lots of funny business. All right. Now I thought I would show you the number of absentee votes, by the way. So in other words, you get a lot, when you lost chain of custody of your ballots, that's when you see ridiculously high turnout. You had a lot of absentee ballots in 2016 too, and notice how much higher it went? Interesting correlation, wouldn't you say? So statistics are good, but they're only so good. I just want you to notice that since they added the machines, that your voting has changed. So there's an effect of your voting. But statistics are only so good. You need to do some canvassing, and I'll teach you about that in a minute. So here we have, I show you the trend now, not just the absolute. So you can see that your rolls grew faster than your population, about 1.3 million more. 1.3 million out of about 4.8 million or so. So you have about 27, 28. Think of it this way, 2 out of every 7. 2 out of every 7 people in your voter rolls don't belong there. That's what you're going to find, about 28%, something like that. All right, here's your county. So Hendricks County, that's where we are, right? So here's your population, just kind of, you're a healthy population here. That's good. In most places I go, it's not growing like that. So you got new people, new families, good businesses here. Lots of new subdivisions. That's good. And your voter rolls are kind of tracking it. That's not bad, although it does seem to kind of shoot up a little bit. Notice the difference between before and after the machines. It's interesting. Anyway, I can do the comparison. I'll do that for you in a minute. And then this is your number of people who voted in your elections. Notice as soon as you started inflating your voter rolls and went to HAVA, notice that look at the difference between your elections. Look how constant they used to be. Nice little pattern suddenly changed once you added the machines. So your machines have an effect on your elections. It's just right there. You can see right before your very eyes that that's real. And you also had a remarkably high, as much as your federal elections. That's preposterously high compared to the others. All right. So if I do the trend comparison, I just did this graph this afternoon. You have about 15,000 too many people in your voter rolls, I'd say, out of about 10% at least, so that probably 1 in 10. But I've got to tell you, that's probably the cleaner voter rolls I've seen in the state, because normally it's about 20 to 30%. So still, but you still have that problem in your county, is my point. Here's another way to look at your data. This is fun. This is from the 2020 election. Now what this is I have age across the bottom, age, and here I have how many people there are of every age. So I can tell you that in your county in 2020, you had about 2,200, 2,300 18-year-olds. And you had about 2,500 35-year-olds and about 2,200 55-year-olds. You notice that people start to pass away here. That's pretty normal since the fall. So I'm in church, I can say that. Okay. Now, this black curve is how many people are registered to vote in your county. So in other words, you have everybody registered to vote above age 60 plus. What that is a sign of is these are dead people or people who moved away. They haven't been taken out of the rolls, so it goes right past. I've been in multiple counties around the country where this black line even comes way out because they just haven't been cleaning the rolls. What it means is you haven't been cleaning your voter rolls. But now look, the red line, the big solid red line, that's who voted in 2020. And notice that just about everybody above age 70 voted. Okay? But notice everybody who you have who's 72 voted, all 1,250 of them. I don't think that's real. I think your ballots are being stuffed. I think people are putting ballots in. Notice that's why they don't clean the voter rolls. You need to have room. You need to have names you can stuff ballots for. And also, if the black line was where it's supposed to be down here around 60%, you couldn't stuff all those ballots. That's the problem with that. Yeah. Demographics?
Demographics, yeah, or whatever, or the census line, right? The census is an estimation. And
Yeah.
then the lines can cross with the real actual numbers or something like that.
Sure. Sure. So go ahead and look it up. Go to your county office, and I've done this multiple times. Go look it up and see what the tax records say your population is. Your county keeps a pretty good tab on who's here, because they keep track of the tax records and the property records pretty aggressively. And what I find is they're within 1%, typically. I got these from the U.S. Census, the blue curve from the U.S. Census. But still, let's say I'm 5% off, but I'm not. But let's say I were. Do you think we have more people or less people? It's still ridiculous, right? And that's one of the reasons why I don't like statistics only. The statistics tell us where the problems are, but they are not proof. They're just like smoke to lead you to the fire. So what I do is I come into what I like to do, and it's part of my 7 steps, and I can go over that, but let me just tell you, because it's getting late and I don't want you to get too tired too fast. I give you copies of your voter rolls, and I give you simple ways to sort them. Here's a simple way to sort your data. Sort it by who voted, the red curve, from oldest to youngest, and just start looking them up. And when you do that, you find all kinds of dead people who voted. And you find all kinds of people who've moved away who voted, because that's where the rolls are the dirtiest. If it was over here, I'd say start young, but it's obviously here's the problem in your county. So I would look at the older voters and go knock on those doors. And what you're going to find is you're going to knock on the door and you say, "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'm Doug Frank from the Voter Integrity Project, and it's of our county. And it says here in the voter rolls that 4 people live here, and all 4 of them voted. Can you verify that for me?" And the people who live there will look and they'll say, "Well, wait a minute. It's just me and Mama. Who are those other 2 people who are voting from here?" That's a very powerful moment, because at that moment, those people now realize that fraud is real and it's happening from their own house. And it's like evangelism. And they tell everybody in their community, and you're going to build a movement around fraud, which is what you got to do. That's kind of in a nutshell what I do. And that's a whole training class, like in 2 hours. And I'm happy anytime I'm in this vicinity, I'd come here and train a team of you and help you build a team to do that. And here's why you need to do that. And I think that's enough data for now. I think I've given you a good enough understanding of the data. I just want to give you a couple of examples. So in New Mexico last year, the governor said, they had another school shooting, and she says, "Enough is enough." She says, "We're putting a ban on open carry, a temporary ban on open carry of weapons." Well, when she did that, 70 sheriffs in the state stepped up and said, "Not in our county." How come they can do that? They can do that because they are the constitutional officer for the county. They are the ones that you elect to protect your constitutional rights. They do something, and they interpose is the technical term. They put themselves between you and the tyranny of government. They defend your constitutional rights. They swear an oath to defend your constitutional rights. So they step in. And so they are nullifying that, right? Well, I just happened to be there. I told you I'm always in the right place at the right time. I happened to be there that day. And 50 guys went up wearing their 45s, all big and obvious, right up to the Capitol steps. And they all stood there and just kind of had a little tea party, okay? Come and arrest us. Come and arrest us. Why can they do that? Because exactly like your governor candidate here said, Curtis, the governor does not have the authority to suspend your constitutional rights. They don't even have the authority to make law. The legislature has the authority to make law. And let's say that the legislature made the law that said you couldn't open carry anymore. You could still nullify that law because that's compromising your constitutional rights. Nobody, no state, no governor, no legislature can undermine your constitutional rights. They supersede any state policy. But you just have to have the stones to stand up and say, "We will not comply." You will not comply with that. And you're going to love this one, Pastor, because that same crazy governor tried to close the churches in New Mexico during COVID. And this church, it's in a town called Truth or Consequences. It's cool. New Hope Revival Church. When he got a call from, he says, "I'm not shutting down." And the state police called him and said, "We've had complaints. You're non-essential. You have to shut down." And so he said, "No, I'm not shutting down." Think about it. The First Amendment of the Constitution, of the Bill of Rights, freedom of Religion is the very first one, okay? The governor cannot shut down the churches. That's not, you're disenfranchising. Well, he went and talked to his sheriff. I love this story. He talked to his sheriff, and the sheriff says, I'll go to jail before I let them shut your church down. And he met every Sunday morning while the parishioners were coming in. He stood outside the door, and the state police were across the street ready to shut him down. And the sheriff just stood there, and he had talks with them and everything. And the sheriff went over and says, look, I have the jurisdiction here. I got this. See you guys. You can leave. Okay? I mean, he interposed between the church and the government. I love that sheriff for doing that. There's a whole movie about this. It's Chris Ann Hall, who I'm a huge fan of her. She just put this movie out. It's called Non-Compliant to the Sheriff, and she discusses that in particular case. So that's a good movie to see if you want to see that. What's the point I'm making here? Oh, I have to tell you one more example, and then you'll understand my point. I just came back from Alaska. In Alaska, they have no constitutional officers. They don't even have counties. They have boroughs. They've divided the state up into boroughs. There's nobody between the governor and the people. Let's say that you went to J6 and the FBI wants to come and investigate. They have to bring their warrant to your sheriff and ask permission to arrest you. The sheriff has jurisdiction. But in Alaska, there's nobody like that. So the FBI just comes right in and smashes into people's houses there. Well, the people had enough of that, so the people stood up. And the people are saying, if we don't have a sheriff to defend our constitutional rights, we're going to defend our constitutional rights. Think of it. If the government says we're going to come take away your guns away, what are you going to say? Come and take them. Come and take them. But you're willing to say that because that makes sense to you. But when the government comes and says we want to take your ballots, what do? You hand them over. Stop it. Stop it. Now, here's the key idea. If you can prove that there's fraud in your county, you can go to your commissioners and you can say, every one of these fraudulent ballots is disenfranchising one of our citizens from their correct ballot. Their rights are being undermined. Their constitutional right is being disenfranchised from them. Therefore, we nullify any state policy that's disenfranchising us from our constitutional rights. See how this works? Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to form a team. I want you to find 200 cases of fraud in your county. You'll easily find it, okay? Maybe a little harder in this county because it's spread out. But 200 cases of fraud. Then I want us to sit down together and I want to look at it. I want you to narrow it down to 50 cases, fully documented. You notice we're not getting cases of fraud and running to the Secretary of State. That isn't going to do nothing. Or you're going to running to your DA. That ain't going to do nothing. Running to your election board. That ain't going to do nothing. You're being the government. You're being the government. You do the investigation. I'll give you an example. I was in Fresno, California. It was me, a citizen, the sheriff, 3 commissioners, and the county clerk. And she had about 70 sheets of paper in front of her. The first one showed off John Smith. He died in 2006. Here's a copy of his death certificate. They're passing it around. Yep, we remember John. And he gets to the clerk, and the clerk looks him up in the voter rolls. Yep, he stopped voting in 2006. Makes sense. He died, right? Didn't vote for 10 years. Now he's voting in every election. Okay, that's Lazarus, right? What it is people notice that he's still in the rolls, and he's not voting. They're stuffing ballots for him. Okay, we showed 40 examples of that day in Fresno. And we showed another 30 examples of people that had moved away. We had copies of their voting records in other states. I have every state in the country, so I can help you with that. See where we're going? So, in other words, and these are fully documented, unassailable cases of fraud. When we were in Shasta County, I mentioned Shasta County to you, I skipped a step. So you're going to find 200. We're going to narrow it down to 50. We're going to do all the work we need to do to make sure every case is perfectly documented. And what you're going to do you have commissioner meetings here every month? 1 or 2 a month? 1 month? Once per month? Twice a month? Once per month? Twice per month? Every other Monday. Do you get to speak at those?
Well, this is Boone County.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Boone County.
Do you get to speak at them?
Yes.
How many minutes you get? 2 minutes? 3 minutes? Kind of vary, but you get at least 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Imagine this situation. You have 50 cases of fraud you fully investigated. You go up to the commissioners in the commissioner meeting and you say, we've done a research into our elections and we've discovered 50 cases of fraud, and you start reading them one at a time. You read all the details. When your 2 minutes are up, then your 2 minutes start. And you go through all 50 cases. It's in the formal record. Actual cases of fraud. The mistake people are making before is they're taking them to the DA. And the DA looks at it and he says, oh man, I got murders to investigate. I got too much to do. And it's only 50 votes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. And it goes way down on their priority list. Nothing happens. No, it's high on our priority list. You're reading them right into the record. Unassailable cases of fraud. And boy, the media comes after that, and they'll start investigating every one of those, which is why you have to do rigorous work. Everyone has to be a perfect case of fraud. And then what happens is one or two of your commissioners, you have 3 commissioners? 3. At least one of them hopefully will go, oh my goodness, this is horrible. And then you inform them at the end of your 50. Now that we've shown you that our elections are being fraudulently manipulated and we are being disenfranchised from our constitutional rights, we want you to nullify the state policy requiring us to use these machines, because we are entitled to. We're protecting our constitutional rights. We are going to vote only on paper, and we're going to count our own ballots, and we're going to bring in all the experts to help us doing it, and it's not going to cost it with photo ID, and it's not going to cost anything because we're doing all the work, and you're going to save all the money as a county, and we the people are going to do this. And then you might get one more commissioner to come on board, but usually not, because they have no spine. And the state, and this is why you're not just going to win with the evidence only. You have to have the evidence, and that day that you're reading that in, you made sure the media knows that you were doing there. You're going to announce it ahead of time so that they have media reporting on it, and you've called all the super moms, and every town's got lots of super moms, I know. Boy, they're saving our country. And you pack that room overflowing. You make sure it's overflowing with people. That scares the bejeebers out of your commissioners. So you're reading actual fraud in there, and you inform them at the end, by the way, it's a felony for you to disenfranchise any of us from our constitutional rights. So now you're on notice as well. So not only are we nullifying these state policies which are disenfranchising us from our constitutional rights, you're on notice that if you continue to use these systems, we're going to sue you, and you're going to be convicted for felonies because you are enabling our constitutional rights to be taken from us. That usually is not enough, but you see where I'm going? We just keep increasing the heat. One of my favorites was one of the ladies and one of the commissioners. She said, oh, Dr. Frank, that's only 50 cases of fraud. That's not enough to overturn any of our elections. And so I just said to her on the record, I just said, okay, then that just means you and 49 other county officials have to give up your ballots in the next election, because that's what you're asking us to do. And by the way, we have another 200 in process, so we'll see you next 2 weeks from now. We'll bring 50 more in. See where this is going? It's untenable for them to hold that position, logically and ethically, and they will not be able to withstand that political pressure. But if they're still standing, and sometimes they do, this is what you do next. You need to think of the First Amendment as a stack of weapons. And you need to fight this like a war, because it is. And you need to use all of your First Amendment weapons to their full extent and stop being sweet Indiana ladies and men. You need to fight a war. And in a war, people die, right? In a shooting war, there's blood on the ground. Well, in a First Amendment war, there are going to be casualties. You need to make sure you take some casualties. My favorite. So, remember I told you about that lady said, it's only 50 ballots. Oh, yeah? She's a grandma, and she drove her kids to elementary school. So a group of supermoms got organized. 10 of them are on the streets at the elementary school in the morning when grandma drops off her grandkids at the elementary school. And they all have signs that say, you know, Mrs. Jones won't defend our constitutional rights. Okay? And they're going back, and her grandchildren say, Grandma, how come you're not defending our constitutional rights? And all of their friends at school are saying to them, how come your grandma doesn't defend our constitutional rights? Are you kidding? The next day, that woman resigned, okay? She realized, oh, those MAGA people, those conservative people, you know, those horrible, they're so rude. Yeah, you want to castrate our children, okay? All we did was carry signs, all right? You see the difference? We need to fight this war like it's a war, okay? And get your signs out there, and you picket. You picket them at their offices. You picket them at their homes. When they go grocery shopping, you're picketing in front of the store, okay? It's your First Amendment right. Now, here's the thing. It's not just you. Because if it's just you, the cops might come and arrest you. You need to have 20 or 30 of you. And my favorite example of that is in Ohio, when the governor, DeWine, during COVID said, you all have to, no groups bigger than 10, and you all have to wear masks. Remember, all that stuff was going on. A group of supermoms organized a dance in the capital of Columbus, and 600 of us turned up for the dance, and we played Spin the Bottle, and we kissed and danced and snuggled all night long. It was a big super spreader party, and we streamed the whole thing online, and we invited the governor to come and join us, right? Okay? And we had the best time that night, okay, in your face, Governor, because we nullify your policy because you do not have the right to disenfranchise us from our constitutional right to assemble. That's the fourth one in the First Amendment, right? Right to peaceably assemble. We were peaceable, all right. We were kissing and loving. It was a great, great night. You understand the point? And those ladies, the same group of ladies, gosh, I love them. They were organizing shopping parties. It was kind of a secret. They would ambush a store. Like they'd all show up at Kmart, and they'd all have masks on, and they'd go into Kmart, and then they'd take all their masks off, and they'd go window shopping for hours. Okay? What are the managers going to do? Arrest them all? No. They can't. That's why you don't do it by yourself. You need a group. But the point is, you're going to nullify. Now, I don't know how your sheriff is here. If you don't have a sheriff who will interpose for you, is he a good sheriff? He's a good one here? Would he interpose? Okay, so I'm so glad you said that. It's so much easier if you have a sheriff. Because what you do is you take those 50 cases to him, and you say, look, we've already fully explored all this. It's all fully documented. You don't have to do anything, Sheriff. Please just assign a case number to it. What's so beautiful about that is when you're in the courtroom reading to the commissioners, you cite the case number too. It's beautiful. These are cases of identity theft. He doesn't have to investigate. He just has to acknowledge, yeah, a crime has taken place. Yeah. I do it before. I didn't mention it before because the county I was in last didn't have a good sheriff, and I was kind of not thinking that way. But if you have a constitutional sheriff, that's a big deal. And that's another idea. If you can't ask your sheriff to stand alone. You know that church in Truth or Consequences where they were trying to shut down that church, and he stood out front? Yeah, smart sheriff. You know what he did? He deputized every member of that church. They were all sheriff deputies, which is a beautiful, beautiful strategy. And it was a good sheriff. And the point is, the people get together, the state's going to just sit there and be mad, and there's nothing they can do about it. There was a sheriff in Lewis County, Washington, and it was like a meeting like this, and he was sitting in back, and one of the people said, well, what if the Secretary of State sues us, or what if they say we have to use this machine or that? And the sheriff just stood up in the back of the room, had a big cowboy hat. They can wear cowboy hats in church there. And he stood up and he says, nah, he says, they can say whatever they want. I got the keys to the building. Do you see? Yeah, so a sheriff is a good deal. If you have a good sheriff, this could be our beachhead. And what I mean by beachhead, and I think I'll wrap up with this and maybe just take questions, or we can end it for the night or whatever. As I've learned, when I first started this work in 2021, I was just kind of like shotgun, going everywhere, like one day here, one day here, all over the country. Last year, I was more doing like 4 or 5 days in a row in one state and doing training and more nurturing of the teams. That's been very successful. What I've learned, though, is there's a beachhead county in every state. There's a beachhead county, a county where you've got a good sheriff and a good commissioners and a good citizenry that's willing to step up. And once you have that beachhead county stepping up, other counties will come on. But you need one to be willing to step up. And when they do step up, it's going to be rough at first because the state's going to come down on you. A lot of counties need the money from the state, and they say, well, we're going to take back money from you then. And there's this one little county, I remember in Kentucky, they have their total budget's $9 million, and they get another $5 million in grants from the state just so they can survive. And they're a great county, but nobody wants to say anything because if they lose their $5 million, they can't run their own county. So money is a lot of counties have sold out to the state. You have to be ready to stand. And so I'm hoping you guys maybe are beachhead county here. And if you are, man, I'll bring all the resources I got to bear to help you. But we're looking for that beachhead county. I'm trying to wrap it up now. So maybe you're it. Any question? Should I end it there, John? Or did I leave anything important out? I mean, I could go for 8 hours. I have hardly showed you any of the data I've got. But I think that's pretty good. Yeah.